Hello and welcome then to this week's episode. This is episode 7 as we are looking at the power of praise this week and how it can basically improve behaviour in schools, not just for students, but also it can work with staff as well to motivate staff. It can help provide and build that culture that we need in order to make sure that students can succeed. So let's get into it. So this week then we're looking at the power of praise and the impact it can have both on teams and students and any work environment. If you think about kind of not just schools, but in any business sense, the power of praise is really, really important. I haven't met anybody who doesn't want praise and recognition for what they've done, and yet we don't use it enough. And actually, if we use it consistently and sincerely, and that's the most important thing, because a lot of people use praise, but when it comes across as being insincere, it kind of feels false. So praise is really important as long as it's meant and it has that kind of real purpose and the belief behind it. So praise can be used for encouragement, motivation, positive reinforcement, self-esteem. It can build people up, make them feel more confident. It can support them. It can be about showing appreciation for what they've done, recognition along with that as well. Gratitude, just a simple thank you for what they've done. If you really appreciate something, that's really helpful. Confidence, that mixes in with that self-esteem and then building people up. Ultimately, if we build people up, they're more likely to be successful in life, because if we keep putting them down, it ruins their confidence. If we want them to be successful, we want them to grow, we want them to be productive, it helps build relationships, it empowers people, and it can inspire them as well. Ultimately, if you've got a team that is getting praise and recognition for what they're doing, they're more likely to be successful to move forward and onto greater things. The biggest enemy within any kind of team or culture is actually if we have like a fear culture where staff and students are worried about doing something. So for example, if you use a student idea, where like if you say to a student, I want you to do this 10 questions, if you don't do this 10 questions, then you'll be staying behind for a detention. That fear element is likely to, they'll do the 10 questions, but they're not likely to do any more. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm looking for who can reach this amount. If you get to this amount, I'm going to be giving you praise and reward. You're far more likely for students to reach that amount and then think, well, actually, I'm going to go on and do a little bit more. And that's what we want them to do, is we want them to encourage them to do it. I remember a conversation I had years ago with another member of staff who said, about different types of leadership and whether you have someone who's kind of that dictatorial kind of leadership where they just tell people what to do, and if they don't do as they're told, they get punished or sanctioned or told off. And I used to say to them, but by having that, if you set the mark of being like, I want you to get to a 10, then they would meet that 10, but they're never going to go past it. And his argument was, well, if I want them to give me 11 or 12, I'll ask for 11 or 12. I said, well, you're missing the point. The point is, if you want people to exceed your expectations, you have to give them that praise and reward so they do it for themselves. The biggest mistake we have in schools is that we think that students do as they're told because we tell them to. And actually, what we've got to do is convince them to buy into it themselves. If we can get them to buy in to behaving because they want to, that's a far more powerful shift, because it's about their own mindset. They're doing what they're supposed to because they want to. So it comes from their own reflection of what they're doing. And that's difficult to get. That's part of that culture. So if we can develop praise and reward around those kind of key themes, like we said, gratitude and confidence and all those sort of things, then we're more likely to get students to do what they're supposed to. So what are the different types? Well, we've got lots of different types. I'll list them on the screen as we go. You've got verbal praise, straightforward, thank you, well done. You're doing fantastic, excellent, thanks for meeting that expectation. Verbal praise is just quick and easy, and it's something you can do really kind of quickly in any kind of environment. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just recognizing, looking for the opportunities. You have to look for the opportunities to praise students. It's really difficult. And if you've got someone who's really naughty in your lesson, it's really difficult to kind of praise them if they think, well, they're doing everything wrong. But sometimes it's just about finding something they've done right, or even recognizing they've put more effort in. It doesn't mean you have to give them massive amounts of reward and praise. It's just recognition, saying, well done, I've noticed you've done that today. I do it with students when I'm walking around the school. If I see someone who I've told them a couple of times during the week to take the jewellery off because they've got too much excessive jewellery, and then I see them one day and they've already got that jewellery off, it might be that someone's just told them down the corridor, but just recognising, going, well done, thank you for that, I appreciate that. It makes them feel good. And the good thing about praise is it works two ways. Going back to the 7 habits, about win-win. So if you're praising a student and they're receiving that praise, they feel good, you feel good. It kind of generates this buzz and feeling, and it is infectious. So you've got to get it right. So that's the verbal praise. Non-verbal praise, then simple gestures, thumbs up, a simple nod. So well done, thank you. With that, so that verbal praise and the non-verbal. But the non-verbal one's just quick and easy. And then the specific praise, acknowledging specific actions that a student does, so that can be mixed in with other types like verbal and non-verbal, but actually mentioning what it is that they've done. So rather than just like kind of like thank you, you can say thank you for coming in and taking your coat off without me having to ask. Again, really, really basic things. And some people don't like doing it because I've had these kind of discussions with people before where they say, well, why would I thank them for doing something that's an expectation? And my argument is to go, well, if you don't, are they going to continue to meet your expectation? And then sometimes their argument will be, well, I'll just issue the sanction. I'm like, you're missing the point. There's nothing wrong with being positive and giving praise. And those people are the ones who normally struggle with the behaviour, and they're constantly having those arguments with students because they create that negative atmosphere. If you create an atmosphere of praise and reward, then students will naturally do things because they know what's coming. They know the expectation that they're going to get some sort of response. And that just helps build that culture within the classroom environment. And it also works with staff. And I'll talk about some experiments and things that I've done in the past to kind of motivate staff as well. And it can go both ways. Different types of people. Some people will see it as a challenge. You know, if they miss out on praise and reward, they say, right, well, I want that next time. And other people will sulk about it. And that's a bit like that glass half empty, glass half full. It can be difficult to kind of generate that culture. Public praise is about sharing positive feedback in front of the class, in front of peers, or in front of staff. You know, if a member of staff's done something well, I quite like to, you know, send an email out to staff saying thank you for these people for doing this. It's a really good way to kind of deal with people who don't get on board without criticizing them, because actually what you're doing is you're saying nothing about them, but they know it. So there's not really, you're not saying that negative kind of attitude. You're not kind of picking on them, but what you are saying is these people have met my expectation. So simple things like thank you to all the people who turned up on duty this week. I really appreciate that. It's been really, really helpful. You know, it's made a big difference. Those people who haven't, hopefully they'll pick up on the subtlety of that. Some of them will never do that, and that is just, you know, that's human beings at the end of the day. It's not a criticism, it's just that's what people are like sometimes, and those are the ones you do have to pick up on a personal level. And again, how we challenge them in that situation, again, is really important. Not creating that fear culture, but a culture of accountability by saying to them, is everything okay? We'll talk more about that and how we challenge behaviours in the future and how we can do it in a supportive way rather than just creating a fear culture. Written praise, notes, stickers, kind of that goes with that really in terms of recognition that people like that. And using people's name is really, really important. It comes back to that Charlie Taylor's checklist that we talked about way back a few videos ago, where using someone's name is just personalising things. It makes it feel like they've been recognised. And like we said before, more often than not, when students misbehave, it's for two reasons. It's because they're either after something or trying to avoid it. And more often than not, if they're after something, it's attention. But if you can give them that positive attention, again, it's about getting the right type of attention with that praise and reward. So that's kind of written praise. And personal praise is basically where it's, again, just coming back to one-to-one conversation. It could be pulling someone to one side rather than publicly. If you know that they're not going to respond publicly, some students and some staff don't like that public praise. Knowing them and knowing what praise works for someone is also important in terms of building that culture. If you know that someone doesn't respond well to public praise, but personal praise works really, really well, then pick the right type of praise for that person. Again, praise is something that's can be quite personal sometimes to get it right. And then there's obviously the last one, tangible, whether it be vouchers, stickers, stamps, money, you know, or an item. You know, it could be something like I don't know, like with small children, it could be things like pens, pencils, rulers, footballs, those sorts of things. Tangible kind of rewards where it's such as something that you can actually get hold of is really, really powerful. A sticker can be really powerful. I don't care how old you are, some people do like a sticker. So I did an experiment recently with staff where leading some training literally within the last couple of weeks, and all the staff were on time. I stood on the door, gave them a sticker, and we were talking about the power of praise. That was the whole session, similar to this. And I stopped giving stickers out once we got past the start time, and then I started the presentation. About 5 minutes into it, I mentioned this idea of praise and reward and giving people something for just small things and giving the sticker. Those people who got the sticker were really chuffed, majority of them anyway. And then, of course, there was people who didn't. And I said to them, there's two types of people in the room. There'll be people who go, oh, I want one next time. I'm going to make sure I'm on time. I'd be interested to see what happens next time we do some training. And there'll be other people who will probably sulk about it, who will probably moan, who'll probably go and say, well, why did you do that? That was just embarrassing. And those are people who haven't got on board with the culture. Those are the people who aren't willing yet to take that step. And what you've got to do is try and convince the majority, and then hopefully those people will get on board. If they can't, then they're not really right for being in that school because they're not part of your culture and the way forward. And I'm going to be brutal about that, because ultimately they are the people that are stopping you from moving forward to that positive environment where you're giving that praise and reward, and you want to give out for recognition of people doing. But ultimately, if they're late, they're late. They've got to take accountability for themselves. And it's about being professional, and it's the same with students. Okay, there'll be some that will moan about it and will not like it, but ultimately you've got to give that praise and reward for the people who are doing things right. we far too often we miss out on those students who do things right all the time. So that's important in terms of making sure that we give recognition for all the people who do the right thing all the time, and they're the ones who get missed. So going back to the reasons for that praise, improves motivation, increases self-esteem, it gives creates positive relationships, and allows students to want to do something for you because they know they're going to get that recognition and response. So it's really powerful for motivating people. It's all about that stick, the carrot, not the stick. Too many schools just focus on that punitive nature of like just punish. Don't get me wrong, there is a place for punishment. There has to be for certain things that students do, but I genuinely believe that if you get praised right, and if you get that kind of challenge and consistency, and we talked about consistency be the enemy of all kind of progress, then you can almost do away with sanctions if you get it absolutely spot on. The issue is consistency and getting everybody to buy into it and getting everybody to be on board with that praise and recognition. So when we did a big push on praise recently, you had majority of staff issuing points, some people issuing like hundreds of points in a day and recognition for what students are doing. And yet there'll always be somebody who will be kind of in opposition to what you're doing. Now, whether it's through choice, whether they kind of deliberately don't want to do it, or that's just because they're too busy and forget, that's something you've got to look at individually. But there'll always be some, like we had some who just didn't issue out any positive points at all. So why were they not on board with that? Is it because they don't feel part of the culture? Is it they don't feel safe? Something to look into, because ultimately if you're going to go through rewards and praise for students, you've got to get all the staff on board. If you do that, it has a significant impact on behaviour. When we did this positive behaviour push, what we found was we reduced like the behaviour by 80% of the negative behaviour, and it's something we have to keep going back to. And it's also something we have to do in our senior leadership team, is going around looking for staff. And simple things like if I go in and see a good lesson, I'll make sure I go back and write a postcard, put a stamp on it. I've got a little stamp with my face on it. It's something really silly, but giving that to staff makes a massive difference, because it's about saying, hey, look, I recognise what you're doing. It's really important to me. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Sometimes it can just be a post-it note. I've had cards before put in my pigeonhole, just when someone's walked in and said, I saw your lesson today, I thought it was really good, I really enjoyed it. And it does pick you up, and it creates a culture, creates a buzz. When we did this positive praise day around school, it was just about taking a step back, coming back to 7 habits, sharpening the saw, going back to basics and saying, hey, look, we know that this is important, so let's just do a reset and then flood the school with positive rewards. And you've got to be careful that you don't overdo it, because if you lose the kind of meaning behind it, then the rewards mean nothing. So you've got to be careful you don't flood it too much. I must emphasize that. But ultimately, if you do kind of really do a positive push every now and again, it creates a real buzz and a vibe around the school that is infectious, and people want to do well and people want that recognition. And then if you praise the staff for doing that and being involved in that, again, it creates that kind of atmosphere of a positive caring culture. And that's hard to get within schools because they're so busy. There's lots of stress. There's lots of things. There's always marking and exams and things to prep for and organise. So praise is really, really powerful to shift and change a culture. And people often say, what do you do to change behaviour in a school? Well, it's not just as simple as having a good policy. Okay, that's part of it. It's not just as simple as having sanctions. Part of it. It's not just as simple as praise and reward. It's about all of it together to develop and change that culture. And there's lots of stuff out there and books on culture well worth reading if you want to develop that culture in school. And it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. You have got to keep working at it. You've got to keep talking to staff, over communicating, videos, PowerPoints, training, conversations, meetings, recognition in meetings, just really simple praise in a meeting. At the start of the meeting, just say, right, I just want to say thank you for a couple of things at the beginning of the meeting, recognition of what people have done, particularly if people go above and beyond. I mean, that's the real one that you've got to make sure you don't miss out. And if someone does something above and beyond what the normal expectations are, you must show recognition for it. Otherwise, you will never get that again, because people will say, well, what's the point? I didn't get any recognition for it. Not that people want recognition. It's not like everyone sort of says, well, I only do this because I want recognition. It's more like people are doing it because they care about their job, and the recognition is like the icing on the top. So giving that praise and reward is so powerful to everything that we do. I haven't met anybody who does not want recognition for what they've done. And simple things like stickers, post-it notes, cards, emails, anything at all is just powerful. Just, take from this, if you were taking this one last sort of minute we've got left, if you're going to take one thing from this video, the next time you're in that environment and you're working with someone, I just want you to issue some praise out and just take a moment to kind of watch what happens and observe what happens and the impact of that praise and reward. And when you see it, just note it and then think, how can I do this again? And try it with other people, and just constantly kind of review the impact of that praise. and how it motivates people, and also how it makes you feel, because once you start doing it, it becomes quite addictive. It's really powerful. And I defy anybody not to kind of get something from it. And ultimately, in a kind of time in schools where it's stressful, obviously we've got all the strikes going on at the moment, praise and reward is probably the most important thing that you could have in terms of when people doing things right. Whether it's someone stepping up to cover a lesson, whether it's somebody who, you know, runs an errand for you or makes a phone call for you, helping each other out is really, really powerful. I know I've got a couple of people that I work with, and we just look out for each other, and it's just that recognition. Really, thank you for, you know, covering us today, or taking my turn in the isolation room, or those sort of things. Is so powerful. A little thank you goes a long way. The power of praise is incredibly important. Hopefully get some use out of that. I look forward to speaking to you in the next video, as we move forward with our kind of development of ideas and things that we can share around behaviour and how we can improve behaviour across schools. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.